Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has subtly but firmly criticized President Donald Trump's latest outburst over trade, cautioning that emotional reactions rarely lead to progress during sensitive negotiations. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Speaking during his visit to Malaysia for the ASEAN summit on Monday, Carney emphasized the importance of patience and composure when navigating complex international agreements. His remarks came just days after Trump launched an all-caps tirade on social media, blasting Canada over a televised advertisement he claimed was misleading about U.S. trade policy. The controversy began when a Canadian government-sponsored ad aired during the World Series, featuring a clip from a speech by former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. The ad, produced by Ontario's provincial government, aimed to highlight historical perspectives on tariffs and trade cooperation. But Trump took it as a personal affront, accusing Canada of manipulating Reagan's legacy to undermine his own tariff policies. In his social media post, Trump fumed, "Ronald Reagan loved tariffs for purposes of national security and the economy, but Canada said he didn't. Their advertisement was fraudulent and was allowed to run during the World Series. Because of this serious misrepresentation and hostile act, I am increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now." The escalation was swift and sharp. Within a day, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced he was suspending the advertisement, calling it a necessary step to prevent further economic fallout and to allow trade discussions to continue. But the damage to diplomatic relations had already been done. Carney, who has carefully cultivated a pragmatic and cooperative tone in his dealings with Washington, did not hide his frustration over the president's unpredictable behavior. When pressed by reporters about whether he had spoken to Trump since the outburst, Carney confirmed that no communication had taken place and made it clear that it was up to the U.S. president to explain why the once warm relationship had soured. In any complicated, high-stakes negotiation, you can get unexpected twists and turns, and you have to keep your cool during those situations, Carney said, his words a thinly veiled rebuke to Trump's impulsive social media diplomacy. The Prime Minister went on to stress that Canada's approach to trade is guided by principle, patience, and long-term economic benefit, not by momentary political flare-ups. Trump, however, appeared uninterested in reconciliation. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on his way to Japan, he curtly dismissed the idea of meeting Carney in the near future. "No, I'm not going to be meeting with them for a while," he said. "I'm very happy with the deal we have right now with Canada. We're going to let it ride." These comments marked a stark contrast to the optimism that had surrounded the pair just weeks earlier. When Carney visited the Oval Office earlier in the month, both leaders projected confidence that a sectoral trade deal, focused on manufacturing and clean energy, was within reach. The visit had been described by insiders as cordial and constructive, with Trump even referring to Carney as a smart negotiator and a good guy. But the sudden escalation over the Ontario ad has thrown those talks into disarray. Observers say the incident reflects a broader challenge facing Canada and its allies as they navigate an increasingly volatile trade environment under Trump's administration. The U.S. president's habit of using tariffs as a political weapon has repeatedly caught other nations off guard, forcing them to choose between confrontation and accommodation. For Carney, who built his reputation as a calm and steady policymaker during his years as Bank of England governor, Trump's unpredictability presents both a diplomatic and economic headache. The additional 10% tariff could have ripple effects across key Canadian industries, including steel, aluminum, and automotive manufacturing, sectors that have already been strained by earlier rounds of U.S. protectionism. Yet despite the setback, Carney remains committed to dialogue. Canadian officials have indicated they are still pursuing back-channel communications with U.S. counterparts to de-escalate tensions. Ottawa insiders say the Prime Minister's team believes the president's anger will eventually subside once domestic political pressures ease. Internationally, Carney's remarks in Malaysia were also seen as an attempt to reassure other trading partners that Canada will not be drawn into a tit-for-tat trade war. "Canada stands by its commitments," a senior aide said. "We're not in the business of trading insults, we're in the business of building partnerships." Trump's decision to suspend direct talks, however, underscores just how fragile that partnership has become. Only weeks ago, analysts were hailing the Carney-Trump relationship as one of the most promising alliances between Washington and Ottawa in recent memory. Now, that optimism has given way to uncertainty. Diplomatic sources in Washington suggest that while Trump's anger over the ad may have been genuine, it also offered a convenient pretext to tighten tariffs at a politically opportune moment. With U.S. midterm elections looming, the president has been eager to project strength on trade, particularly with neighboring countries that he claims have taken advantage of American markets. Meanwhile, Canadian political observers say Carney's measured tone could play well domestically, reinforcing his image as a calm and competent leader in contrast to Trump's fiery persona. His refusal to engage in a public shouting match aligns with Canada's long-standing diplomatic tradition of restraint, even in the face of provocation. Still, the stakes remain high. The 10% tariff increase adds to an already heavy burden for Canadian exporters, potentially driving up prices for consumers and straining businesses that rely on cross-border supply chains. Economists warn that continued instability in US-Canada relations could hinder economic recovery at a crucial moment. As the ASEAN summit continues, Carney is expected to meet with several Asian leaders to explore alternative trade opportunities. Analysts say this move could be part of a broader effort to diversify Canada's economic partnerships and reduce its reliance on the US market, a strategy that has gained traction in light of recent disputes. While Trump insists he is happy with the deal we have right now, few believe the situation is truly settled. Trade officials in both countries remain on alert, aware that another tweet or press comment could once again shift the course of negotiations overnight. For now, Carney appears determined to stay above the fray. His message, delivered calmly from Malaysia, was unmistakable: trade negotiations require steadiness, not showmanship. And though his words were measured, they carried a clear undertone that Canada's leadership will not be dictated by the whims of one man, no matter how powerful. The tension between Ottawa and Washington had been simmering for weeks, but no one could have predicted just how quickly it would boil over. It began as a simple misunderstanding, or so it seemed. A one-minute advertisement aired during one of the most watched events in North America, the World Series. The ad, commissioned by Ontario's provincial government, featured a snippet of a historic speech by former U.S. President Ronald Reagan, meant to celebrate the enduring values of trade, cooperation, and mutual prosperity. To the average viewer, it was nothing more than a nostalgic nod to the shared history between two nations long bound by geography and commerce. But in Washington, the reaction was far from benign. President Donald Trump, known for his impulsive use of social media and his unyielding stance on trade, took the ad as a personal insult. To him, it wasn't a tribute, it was a challenge. Within hours, his outrage spilled onto his social media feed in a now infamous all-caps rant accusing Canada of spreading lies about Reagan's stance on tariffs. His message was filled with anger and disbelief as he declared that Ronald Reagan had loved tariffs for reasons of national security and the economy, and that Canada's claim to the contrary was fraudulent. The post concluded with a dramatic declaration that he would be slapping an additional 10% tariff on Canada, over and above what they are paying now. It was a stunning announcement that sent shockwaves through both political and financial circles. Back in Ottawa, the reaction was one of disbelief. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who had spent the better part of his tenure cultivating a cautious but cordial relationship with the U.S. president, was blindsided. In a matter of hours, months of quiet diplomacy, trade discussions, and mutual assurances had evaporated. The optimism that had surrounded his recent trip to the Oval Office, where the two leaders had smiled for the cameras, exchanged compliments, and hinted at an upcoming sectoral trade deal, had suddenly collapsed under the weight of a single television spot. Carney's advisors scrambled to contain the fallout, trying to make sense of the president's sudden fury. What had been intended as a light, historically themed message about economic cooperation was now being painted as a deliberate act of deception. When reporters caught up with Carney days later in Malaysia during the ASEAN summit, the Prime Minister appeared composed, even serene, despite the political storm brewing back home. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos of Trump's impulsive rhetoric. Asked whether he had spoken with the president since the outburst, Carney replied that he had not, and that it was up to Trump to explain why their once promising partnership had soured so dramatically. Then, in a moment that captured global attention, Carney delivered a line that many saw as a veiled jab at Trump's temperament. In any complicated, high-stakes negotiation, he said, you can get unexpected twists and turns, and you have to keep your cool during those situations. His words were deliberate and measured, his tone steady. It was not just a comment on trade, it was a message about leadership, about patience, and about the perils of letting emotion dictate